Hello, miladies of inestimable value. Obsession is rarely about love. It's about power colliding with mystery. Think about that for a moment. Studies show that human beings are most drawn to what they cannot easily define, not what they can conquer, label, or control. That's exactly why alpha males, men who are used to dominating every room and commanding every woman's attention, find themselves quietly unsettled, even haunted, by sigma females. Because unlike alpha women who fight them on the same battlefield of dominance, sigma females are playing an entirely different game. Actually, scratch that. They're not playing at all. And nothing rattles an alpha man more than realizing that his victories, his throne, and even his charisma mean absolutely nothing to the one woman who doesn't even blink at them. It's like watching a lion roar in the jungle, and the deer just yawns and walks away. The lion isn't angry, he's obsessed. And that obsession with sigma females, that's what we're about to unpack today. Number 1, she breaks the cycle of power addiction. Alpha men thrive on validation. It's the fuel behind their drive, their dominance, and their hunger for recognition. Every handshake, every compliment, every glance of admiration feeds into the empire they've built around themselves. It's not always obvious because they mask it well under confidence and authority, but at their core, alpha males are addicted to being noticed, praised, and respected. It's their high. And like any addiction, once they're used to it, they need it constantly. This is where sigma females completely rewrite the script. Unlike most people who orbit alpha men, they don't hand out admiration like currency. They don't bow to power, they don't gasp at his influence, and they don't play the role of audience to his show. To a sigma female, his achievements might be impressive, but they aren't impressive enough to define him. She's not starving for his attention, and she's certainly not feeding his ego just because he's used to it. What happens next is something alpha males rarely experience: withdrawal. When the applause dies, when the validation isn't given freely, it shakes him. He finds himself circling back to her, replaying her words, even her silences, trying to figure out why her approval feels so rare, so expensive, so worth chasing. The very thing he thought he didn't need, her recognition, becomes the one thing he cannot stop craving. And here's the twist. Sigma females don't withhold validation as a strategy. They're not playing hard to get. They're simply uninterested in worshiping false idols. If a man's entire sense of self depends on external approval, she sees it as weakness, not strength. And that truth unsettles alpha men because it forces them to confront a part of themselves they usually bury. Over time, that quiet refusal becomes intoxicating. While alpha women often battle alphas for dominance, sigma women break the cycle entirely. They strip away the theater of power and offer something far rarer: presence without pretense. An alpha man may have a room full of people who admire him, but it's the one woman who doesn't that he can't stop thinking about. It's a paradox he can't resist. The more she denies his addiction, the deeper he falls into it. That's why alpha males end up obsessed with sigma females, because she's the only one who starves his ego, yet feeds his soul. Number 2, she doesn't chase, she withdraws. Alpha men are used to a very specific pattern. Women see their power, their confidence, their social influence, and they lean in closer. It's almost automatic. The admiration, the flirtation, the subtle chasing, it all comes with the territory of being an alpha. For them, attention is the air they breathe. But sigma females don't play by that script. Instead of leaning in, they lean out. Instead of chasing, they withdraw. And that one small difference flips the entire game on its head. When a sigma female steps back, she's not doing it to create drama or manipulate. She's not calculating how to make him miss her. Withdrawal is simply her nature. She's not interested in orbiting anyone, no matter how powerful or magnetic they are. Her life is already full, her goals, her independence, her inner world. She doesn't need the alpha male's spotlight to feel complete. And that lack of hunger for him is precisely what ignites his hunger for her. To the alpha male, this withdrawal is destabilizing. He's built an identity around being wanted, respected, and admired. He's used to people moving toward him, not away from him. So when the Sigma female pulls back, it feels unnatural, almost wrong, like gravity suddenly reversed. He doesn't just notice her absence, he obsesses over it. He finds himself questioning why she doesn't respond like everyone else. Did he do something wrong? Is she unimpressed by his power? Why isn't she fighting to stand beside him like others do? The irony is, her withdrawal doesn't weaken her, it strengthens her presence. Every step back she takes forces him to step forward. Every ounce of indifference she shows makes him lean in with curiosity, desire, and eventually obsession. What was once his strength, being chased, turns into a weakness when he meets a woman who simply doesn't care to chase at all. And here's the truth. She doesn't withdraw to test him. She withdraws because her energy is too valuable to waste on proving herself to anyone. That rare self-possession is magnetic in a way he can't explain. The alpha male may have women who run after him, but it's the one who walks away without hesitation that he can't stop running toward. That's why Sigma females live in his mind long after she's gone. Number 3. She mirrors what he pretends to be. Alpha men work hard to project an image of independence. They like to be seen as self-sufficient, unshakable, and untouchable. The truth, though, is that much of that image is performance. Their power often depends on the admiration of others. Their confidence is reinforced by constant validation, and their sense of self thrives on being recognized. It's not that they're weak, it's that their strength is built on an external stage. Then comes the Sigma female, and she quietly exposes the gap between performance and reality. She doesn't announce her independence, she lives it. She doesn't parade her self-sufficiency, she simply practices it every day. Where the alpha male might carefully curate an untouchable aura, the Sigma female doesn't need to pretend, because detachment and self-reliance are woven into her nature. That authenticity is something he can sense instantly, even if he doesn't want to admit it. And that's where the obsession begins. On the surface, he may try to dismiss her, even downplay her choices, but deep down, he feels the sting of contrast. She is what he pretends to be. The independence he tries to sell to others for approval is the same independence she lives without seeking recognition. It's not that she's trying to compete with him, she doesn't even care to. But her authenticity acts like a mirror, forcing him to see the parts of himself that are built on performance rather than truth. That's an uncomfortable experience for an alpha male, because it shakes the foundation of the identity he's carefully built. And yet, it's also magnetic. He can't stop circling back to her, analyzing why she seems freer, lighter, less burdened by the need for applause. It's like watching someone breathe effortlessly while he's been running a marathon to look strong. The more he studies her, the deeper the hook sinks in. Her existence challenges him, not through direct competition but through contrast. She is proof that real power doesn't need an audience. Real independence doesn't need validation. And real untouchability doesn't need to be performed. That's why alpha men become obsessed. It's not just attraction, it's the uncomfortable truth that she embodies the freedom he's been faking all along, and she does it without trying. Number 4. She doesn't flinch at his dark side. Alpha men are used to people reacting strongly to their darker side. Their intensity, their ruthlessness, their hunger for control. These qualities can intimidate, provoke, or even drive others away. Alpha women, in particular, often clash with these traits, either trying to tame them, match them, or neutralize them with their own fire. It becomes a constant battle of wills, a power struggle where each tries to out-dominate the other. For the alpha male, this is familiar territory. He expects resistance, he expects pushback, and in some ways he even thrives on it. But when he encounters a Sigma female, the dynamic changes completely. She doesn't flinch. She doesn't try to fix him, fight him, or control him. She doesn't moralize his flaws or treat his darkness as something shameful to be conquered. Instead, she acknowledges it without judgment. To her, his shadows don't define him any more than his strengths do. She sees the whole man, light and dark, without pretending one half doesn't exist. That lack of fear is what rattles him the most. For a man used to being either idolized or resisted, being calmly accepted is disarming. It exposes a kind of intimacy he isn't used to, one that bypasses ego and goes straight to his core. With most people, he has to hide certain parts of himself to maintain the image of strength. With a Sigma female, he doesn't feel the need to. She already sees through the performance, and instead of recoiling, she remains unshaken. This unnerves him because it strips away his usual defenses. Power, intimidation, charm. None of it works on her the way it does on others. Yet instead of making him feel small, her acceptance makes him feel seen. And being truly seen, especially in places he hides from the world, creates a bond he can't easily escape. What obsesses him isn't just her tolerance of his darkness, but the fact that she treats it as normal, human, and real. She doesn't glorify it, she doesn't fear it, and she doesn't weaponize it. That level of balance is rare, and it unsettles him in the best possible way. With her, he can drop the act. And for a man who's built his entire identity on control, that raw sense of freedom is both terrifying and addictive. Number 5, she refuses his approval currency. Alpha males operate in a world where power and validation are the main currencies. Their entire ecosystem runs on recognition. The respect of other men, the admiration of women, the applause of society. Even alpha women tend to measure themselves in similar terms, battling for dominance in the same arenas, building their worth around influence, position, and external validation. To an alpha male, this is normal. It's the economy he understands best. Status is value. But Sigma females disrupt that entire economy because they simply don't trade in it. They don't measure themselves by who they know, what titles they carry, or how much social influence they command. They don't seek approval, and they don't hand it out cheaply either. What impresses the crowd rarely impresses them. And that indifference cuts deeper than rejection, because it makes the alpha male realize that the very things he spends his life collecting mean absolutely nothing to her. This is where the obsession begins. He can buy respect from others with success, power, or dominance. He can win over alpha women by competing on familiar terms. But a Sigma female refuses his entire marketplace. She doesn't want his empire. She doesn't care about the size of his following. She doesn't see worth in the medals he wears. She is completely unmoved by the things he uses to define himself. And when someone refuses the very thing you're most proud of, it destabilizes your entire identity. The truth is, Sigma females don't reject his currency as an act of rebellion. They reject it because they've already built a different kind of wealth. Their worth is internal. It comes from solitude, from resilience, from knowing they don't need external applause to validate their existence. To an alpha male, that kind of independence feels both threatening and magnetic. It forces him to confront a question he usually avoids. Who would I be without all the validation I've built my life around? That quiet refusal plants a hook in him. The one woman who doesn't need what he offers becomes the one woman he can't stop thinking about. And the more she refuses his approval currency, the more valuable her recognition becomes. Not because she withholds it, but because she doesn't trade in illusions. To an alpha male, that kind of authenticity isn't just rare, it's irresistible. Number 6, she competes without competing. Alpha males are used to competition. In fact, they thrive on it. Their power grows sharper when challenged, and they respect those who try to match their energy, even if they ultimately overpower them. That's why they often find alpha women exciting but predictable. The dynamic is always a duel. Both are fighting for dominance in the same arena, trading the same blows, seeking victory in the same game. It's thrilling for a while, but it's also familiar, and familiarity eventually loses its edge. Enter the Sigma female, and everything shifts. She doesn't compete in the way he's accustomed to because she's not interested in taking his throne, outshining his achievements, or proving she can outdominate him. In fact, she doesn't even recognize his game as worth playing. Instead, she moves by her own rules, builds her own rhythm, and crafts her own version of power, one that exists outside of the alpha's battlefield entirely. That's what destabilizes him. He can't measure her against the same metrics he uses for everyone else. He can't pin her down as an opponent, nor can he dismiss her as a follower. She refuses both roles, and by doing so she creates an entirely new dimension of influence, one he has no control over. For a man who's built his life around control, That's both unsettling and captivating. What fascinates him most is that her power doesn't come from resistance or submission, but from self-definition. She doesn't gain her strength by beating him. She gains it by ignoring the very ladder he's climbed. To the alpha male, this feels almost like sorcery. He's spent years mastering the rules of dominance, only to meet someone who renders those rules irrelevant with a simple refusal to acknowledge them. And this is where his obsession begins. Competing with alpha women is a challenge. Being around sigma females is a revelation. Their very existence proves that power doesn't have to be earned by conquest. It can be embodied without permission, without conflict, without noise. That quiet, effortless strength unsettles the alpha because it highlights the difference between power that is performed and power that simply is. She doesn't compete with him. She competes without competing. And that paradox leaves him both humbled and hooked, because deep down, he knows she's already won without lifting a single weapon. Number 7. She's the one woman he can't easily predict. Alpha men pride themselves on their ability to read people. They can usually predict motives, spot weaknesses, and anticipate moves before anyone else even thinks about making them. With alpha women, it's straightforward. Their strategies are visible. They network aggressively, assert dominance openly, and use charm as a weapon. An alpha man might enjoy the sparring, but he can usually see where it's heading. He knows the script. He's read it before. But with sigma females, that script doesn't exist. She doesn't operate on predictable strategies or obvious social maneuvers. Her choices don't follow the rules of hierarchy or the usual logic of power. She's not climbing a ladder, not broadcasting her moves, and not trying to outshine anyone. Instead, she runs on an internal code that no one else can access. Her decisions come from a private compass that isn't swayed by approval, status, or even expectation. To an alpha male, that's maddening. He finds himself trying to decode her, to predict her next step the way he does with everyone else. But with every attempt, he ends up wrong. She's calm when others would be provoked. She walks away when most would fight to stay. She chooses silence when others would beg to be heard. The unpredictability isn't chaotic. It's precise but invisible to him. And because he can't map her out, he keeps coming back, replaying her moves in his head, analyzing and overanalyzing, yet never cracking the pattern. That's where the obsession takes root. For a man used to being 10 steps ahead of everyone, encountering a woman he can't read feels like a puzzle that refuses to be solved. He can't box her in, can't anticipate her reactions, and can't control the dynamic the way he does with others. She becomes the exception to his rule, the one person who forces him into unfamiliar territory. What unsettles him most is that her unpredictability isn't performance. It's authenticity. She isn't being mysterious to capture attention. She is mysterious because her life runs on depth, not display. That raw difference keeps him hooked, because every time he thinks he understands her, she moves in a way that proves he doesn't. For an alpha male, that's the ultimate addiction. The one woman who refuses to be predictable because she isn't playing to be understood. She's playing to be herself. Number 8. Her confidence is cellular, not performed. Alpha men are trained to recognize power, but they've also learned to detect when it's manufactured. Alpha women often project strength deliberately, the perfect posture, the sharp tone, the carefully calculated moves designed to command attention and assert dominance. It's effective, but it's a performance, a display meant to convince others and themselves of their authority. Alpha men can respect it, even fear it, but deep down they know it's a crafted image. Sigma females operate on an entirely different level. Their confidence isn't something they put on for the world. It's woven into their very being. It's in the way they move, the way they hold themselves, the way they make decisions without seeking approval. It doesn't require applause or acknowledgement. It's quiet, effortless, and unshakable. They radiate certainty because they are certain, not because they want anyone else to believe it. Alpha men notice this immediately. There's a difference between someone who performs power and someone who embodies it. The first can be challenged, critiqued, or exposed. The second commands attention simply by existing, leaving no room for argument or control. It's not flashy, it doesn't need an audience, and that's exactly what makes it irresistible. What fascinates him most is that this type of confidence exposes his own reliance on performance. He may be dominant, respected, and admired, but it's all partially dependent on external acknowledgement. Her power is independent of anyone else's opinion. She doesn't need to convince him, impress him, or challenge him directly. She simply exists fully in herself. That contrast destabilizes him and draws him in because it's a mirror he can't quite look away from. Sigma females make alpha men aware of the difference between what feels real and what is merely staged. And once he experiences that authenticity, it becomes addictive. He's no longer just interested, he's captivated, constantly pulled toward the kind of power that doesn't demand validation, approval, or applause. The kind of power that simply is. Number 9. She makes his alpha games look childish. Alpha men are accustomed to life as a series of strategic moves. They thrive on status battles, dominance displays, and navigating social hierarchies with precision. Every handshake, every conversation, every glance is a subtle negotiation of power, and they take pride in mastering the unspoken rules. To them, these games are serious business, essential to maintaining influence and respect. Then a Sigma female enters the scene, and suddenly everything changes. She doesn't play by the same rules. She doesn't measure her worth by who she outshines, who she impresses, or where she stands on a ladder of status. To her, the games themselves are meaningless. She moves through life with a focus on substance, not spectacle. She doesn't compete for attention, and she doesn't need validation from the same arenas that alpha men and women constantly navigate. That quiet dismissal has an immediate effect on him. All the careful maneuvers he's perfected suddenly look trivial, like playground antics he once took seriously. The strategic posturing, the ego-driven contests, the endless climbing, it's all reduced to noise in her presence. She doesn't critique it or call him out. She simply ignores it. That inaction, that refusal to engage in his theater, forces him to see the futility in what he thought was essential. It's a mix of embarrassment and fascination. He can't help but notice how effortless she is, how unaffected she remains, while he's tangled in the complexities of image and perception. That contrast is humbling. For the first time, he experiences a kind of accountability not through confrontation but through quiet truth. Her calm, grounded presence exposes the performance behind his dominance and the fragility behind his bravado, and that exposure is addictive. He's drawn to her because she holds a mirror up to everything he has constructed, showing it for what it is. Impressive to some, but ultimately unnecessary. Sigma females make alpha men realize that mastery of social games isn't the same as mastery of self, and that realization hooks him in a way no competition ever could. Number 10. She's a sovereign, not a rival. Alpha men are wired to recognize power, but they're used to seeing it as a contest. Alpha women approach life like a battle for the same throne. Every move, every word, every glance is a negotiation of dominance. They want to sit on the same crown, to share the spotlight, to prove that they can match or surpass him. That dynamic is familiar, even predictable, and while it's thrilling in the moment, it inevitably comes with tension, competition, and the need to constantly assert superiority. Sigma females operate on an entirely different level. They don't want the crown he's protecting, nor do they compete for it in any way. Instead, they build their own realm entirely separate from his. Their power isn't measured against anyone else because it exists independently. She doesn't seek to dominate him, control his world, or challenge his hierarchy. Her sovereignty is self-contained, absolute, and undeniable. That difference is disarming for an alpha male. He's used to rivalry, confrontation, and constant testing of strength and status. Here is a woman who threatens nothing in his arena, yet commands everything in her own. She doesn't need his approval, his recognition, or his validation. Her authority is natural, effortless, and absolute, and he can't help but notice it. What makes her irresistible is that her sovereignty is magnetic without being confrontational. Alpha men are drawn to power, but they are equally wary of challenges to it. The Sigma female sidesteps this entire tension. She doesn't provoke competition, yet her presence radiates mastery. She commands respect without demanding it, and in doing so, she creates a unique paradox. He feels compelled to acknowledge her strength even though she's not competing for his territory. In her, he sees a kind of freedom and authenticity he can't replicate. He doesn't have to guard his ego or prove anything. She isn't measuring him against herself. That absence of rivalry makes her presence intoxicating. He is drawn not by conquest, but by the quiet, undeniable reality of her independence. She's a sovereign in a world full of competitors, and that sovereignty hooks him in ways no crown or battle ever could. Number 11. She's dangerous because she doesn't need him. Alpha men are accustomed to a certain dynamic in relationships. They are used to women who need something from them: protection, status, influence, or resources. That dependency reinforces their sense of power. It confirms their role, validates their dominance, and keeps the familiar hierarchy intact. Control feels natural when others are reliant on you, and alpha men are experts at navigating it. Sigma females completely upend that expectation. She doesn't need anything from him. She isn't seeking validation, security, or influence. Her life is already full, her power already intact. She isn't motivated by what he can provide or the territory he can offer. That kind of independence is rare, and it's not something he can manipulate, negotiate, or buy into. That's where the danger lies. To an alpha male, being needed is usually a sign of influence. The absence of need is a form of unpredictability. It strips away his usual control and forces him to confront a woman who operates entirely outside his expectations. Her autonomy doesn't challenge him overtly, but it exposes a vulnerability in his own sense of dominance. She cannot be owned, measured, or managed. And that tension is magnetic. Obsession often grows where control ends. He can't dominate her, he can't bend her to his rules, and he can't predict her reactions. Every interaction reminds him that her life exists independently of his, and that independence is intoxicating. It's powerful because it highlights the difference between influence and authenticity. He may control many around him, but he cannot control her. This lack of need, combined with complete self-sufficiency, makes her both terrifying and irresistible. Alpha men are drawn to her precisely because she undermines the usual dynamics they understand so well. Her freedom creates a pull that is impossible to ignore because it's a force he can neither conquer nor contain. In refusing to need him, she becomes a mirror of what he secretly craves yet rarely experiences: true autonomy and absolute self-possession. The danger isn't in aggression or defiance. It's in the quiet certainty that she doesn't depend on him at all. And that certainty is exactly what makes him obsessed. Number 12. She redefines femininity as untamed power. Alpha men are used to a particular version of femininity. Alpha women often wield charm, influence, and dominance like weapons. Their power is measured in how effectively they can assert themselves, command attention, or manipulate outcomes. It's calculated, strategic, and in many ways, familiar. For an alpha male, that's predictable territory. It's something he can recognize, anticipate, and even compete with. Sigma females, however, rewrite the rules entirely. Their femininity isn't a tool or a strategy. It isn't measured by influence, dominance, or who notices them. It's untamed, raw, and elemental. A force that exists naturally, without explanation or justification. It doesn't need a battlefield because its power isn't dependent on combat or comparison. It's independent, instinctive, and utterly self-contained. That untamed energy has a magnetic effect on alpha men. It's unpredictable, powerful, and deeply stirring because it doesn't conform to the frameworks they understand. While alpha women's power can be challenged, matched, or outmaneuvered, the Sigma female's energy simply exists, and there's nothing to fight against. Her raw authenticity forces him to recognize a kind of freedom and intensity he rarely experiences in anyone else. Alpha men secretly ache for that wild, unstructured force. It reminds them of a life beyond strategy, hierarchy, and constant performance, a life where power isn't about proving dominance but about simply being. She evokes a deep fascination precisely because she can't be tamed, categorized, or contained. Her femininity isn't about comparison or conquest. It's a force of nature, and that's what makes her irresistible. She shows him that power doesn't have to be calculated, Charm doesn't have to be wielded, and influence doesn't have to be performed. Her untamed essence challenges him, excites him, and hooks him in a way that no structured competition ever could. Alpha men are drawn to Sigma females not because they are a challenge in the usual sense, but because they exist entirely outside the world they know. Every trait we've explored, her quiet sovereignty, her raw authenticity, her refusal to chase or perform, her untamed power, disrupts the familiar patterns of dominance, admiration, and control that alpha men rely on. She doesn't compete, she doesn't conform, and she doesn't measure her worth through anyone else's eyes. And that's exactly what makes her unforgettable. Being around a Sigma female forces alpha men to confront truths they usually hide, the parts of themselves built on performance, the dependence on validation, the fragility behind their confidence. She reflects what they secretly crave yet rarely achieve: genuine independence, authentic presence, and freedom from the endless games of power. Yet she does all of this without demanding anything from him, without trying to tame or challenge him. She simply is. That combination of magnetism, mystery, and authenticity is intoxicating. It creates an obsession that isn't about control, conquest, or possession. It's about fascination with someone who embodies what they can only aspire to. She is not a rival, not a prize, not a reflection of their ego. She's a force of nature, a sovereign being whose power exists on its own terms. Alpha men can admire many, compete with some, and even love a few. But Sigma females leave a mark that nothing else can. Their presence, or even absence, resonates like a quiet gravity, pulling, unsettling, and captivating. To encounter a Sigma female is to be reminded that true power, true confidence, and true independence cannot be earned, captured, or controlled. They simply exist, and for an alpha male that makes her impossible to forget. She is the paradox he can't solve, the freedom he secretly desires, and the force that commands his attention without ever asking for it. She is, in every sense, irresistible. If you found this fascinating, don't let it end here. Subscribe to the channel for more insights that dig deeper than anyone else. Hit the like button to show your support, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. We want to hear your take. And don't forget to share this video with anyone who needs to understand the magnetic power of Sigma females. Every click, every comment, every share helps us uncover more truths about personality, power, and human behavior. So join the conversation and stay part of the journey.